Hey there, I'm Chris Benetti, host of the Smart Author Podcast. In this episode, I speak with Oliver El-Gorr of Freeman Publications, and we discussed why you should email your customers daily, or as frequently as possible. Some of the main topics we will be covering in today's episode include how Oliver was able to write 10 books at such a young age, why he decided to pursue being an author even though he's had tremendous success as an investor, and how, as an author, he over-communicates with his audience to create strong relationships with them. At the end of this episode, please make sure you visit our website where you can find all the show notes plus links mentioned with Oliver. If you're enjoying this episode, please make sure you subscribe so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. And if you're struggling with book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit and a clear plan to get your book sales back on track. Now, let's head over to this fantastic interview. Hey there, smart authors. Welcome back to another episode. Today, I'm joined by the awesome Oliver El-Gorr of Freeman Publications. Oliver, how are you?
Doing good, man. How are you? It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm doing fantastic, and it's a pleasure to have you. So, Oliver, I would love to know how you got into Freeman Publications, and why you decided to publish like a whole bunch of books. What's your background?
So my background is kind of in professionally bumming around. I was in a dead-end job in the UK when I was in my early 20s. I booked a one-way ticket to China, took off with a backpack for a year, and I kind of liked it. So I was like, wow, I need to do something that kind of helps me stay out here, live this kind of life that I was living, this sort of vagabond digital nomad type life. And, I was reading a lot of the time, and I was like, oh, this books seem like a pretty good business. They've been around for about, 400, 500 years. And, it took a few years after that. And then I sort of discovered the idea of, selling books on Amazon being a viable business, combined with my love of investing, the stock market, and then the emerging crypto industry. It just seemed like a really good way to make income doing something that I was already doing for free, essentially, learning all of this stuff and sort of having the books that I wanted to have 10 years before that didn't exist.
You saw books as a viable business model. Like, a lot of people don't make money from books. What did you see differently?
I saw cutting out the middleman, because I understand the traditional publishing industry, it's very, very skewed in favor of the publisher. The author themselves doesn't really get a cut. But then, I was a big Gary Halbert fan, and I understood like that self-publishing, you get the majority of the cut. So my natural reaction was, well, I'm not going to get traditionally published. I'm a nobody. Why don't I see if I can go this self-publishing route and actually make some money myself?
Mm-hmm. So you were already like at that stage, you became somewhat of a nomad. You then learned investing for yourself. Like, at what point would you say that like you had the revelation one day and just was like, oh, I need to write a book. I need to put this information out into the world. And like, you've obviously written a lot of books as well. Like, is there a strategy behind why you've written so many books and the intention behind what you're trying to accomplish with the books?
I was just trying to solve my own problems, because there are hundreds of investing books and many of them very, very good. But the landscape changes so much, especially because of the proliferation of news sources, 24-hour news cycle, social media. I found that a lot of these books became very outdated to the current environment, the environment that I was in. And at that point, I was writing for myself, and I was writing for me at age like 18, 19, 20, thinking like, if I could have done this right from the beginning, here's the information I would have needed.
From a strategic standpoint, was there anything else? Like, the books were a fantastic knowledge source for your past self and the people in that same space. Was there any like further intention behind the books?
I knew it was a good market, because I knew that, the whole like health, wealth, and basically sort of ego industry, those never go out of fashion. And I knew there was money to be made if I committed to it, because we're not going to get to a stage in the next 100 years where people aren't going to want to make more money. And so I thought, okay, there's this big market that exists. Why not try and tap into that with some underserved sections of it?
Yeah, makes sense. And from my perspective as well, it's like investing, there's fundamentals that everyone needs to know, but from a standpoint of what the market's doing, like that's an ever-changing arena essentially. And so it makes sense for like what Freeman Publications done, like a lot of foundational investing books, but then it's like, okay, you need also to know what's happening every single day, every single week in the market. And then that is a natural ascension to what you guys do as a company beyond the books as well.
No, absolutely. Books are timeless, but investing is very timely. People want to know in real time what's going on. And you're right, it completely lends itself to that, because we can say to people, hey, if you wanna get our daily emails, because I do write an email every day, and I think it's incredibly valuable to people because they get to hear from me in real time my thoughts on what's going on right now, as opposed to a book that was written by someone who passed away 40 years ago. You can't reach that person, no matter how hard you try. And the amount of times people will send me an email and I will respond and they'll say, oh, I didn't expect a response. And my reaction is always, well, why do you think my email's in the book? Of course I'm going to respond. That's the whole point. But apparently the bar's very low right now.
It's a lot of people who are like authors, but they don't know how to like operate as like a business person or a human being in general.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer in doing things that don't scale, especially when you're at the very beginning. I remember when I had 25 people on my email list and I would get an email and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is my chance. So I would shoot 20-minute Loom videos for people, and they obviously don't expect that. And they're not going to get that from, the companies who I consider competitors who are 1,000 times bigger than I am. It's just not going to happen. But what I can do is I can leverage the fact that, we are relatively small, we are agile, and we can have that personal touch that other people can't.
I actually still get, so in my software business, I actually still get people being surprised that I shoot Loom videos for my customers when I'm just doing support, like it's super funny.
I think it's funny because sometimes it's a huge time saver for me to shoot a video as opposed to write a very, very long email.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even like the thoughts of like having to structure an email step by step on what they have to do and potentially even gather screenshots and, stuff like that. If it's a technical process, a Loom video is just like, it saves about a quarter, like it's about a quarter of the time in comparison, exactly, if not more, so I find that so funny. Okay. So you just said you email daily. Why should other authors consider doing something similar?
I think it's the most powerful way to interact with your audience, because you have people's undivided attention for 3 or 4 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but in the context of their day, it's very, very unlikely that someone's going to give their undivided attention to anything. And the relationship compounds. And this was really demonstrated to me recently. I was doing a call with one of our members, and she said, oh, my husband was really, really skeptical when I joined the program. And I was like, I completely understand, because frankly, most of our members are 10, 20, or even 30 years older than I am. And she said, he was very skeptical when I joined. And when the market started going, bearish in the past 6 months, he was asking, are you still showing up? Like, am I still showing up to the calls? Am I still showing up every week? And she was like, yeah, of course he is. And people see that I'm still showing up. And there's people who have been there for a year, and they're now like, okay, I'm ready to give this person more money now. I'm ready to have more help. And you don't get that from, one thing I'm very, very against is like the whole weekly newsletter thing, because number one, people forget who you are. And number two, I think it becomes very lazy. I see a lot of people's newsletters and it's like, okay, here are some tweets I found, and here's maybe a quote from a famous person. And I don't think that adds much value to people's lives, as opposed to consistent daily contact. And I think email is like the ultimate communication medium anyway, because everything else sort of gets lost in the noise. But email, you can have a conversation with someone.
And you can control the feed in email, as opposed to you can somewhat in socials and stuff like that, but it's like typically you're at the mercy of the algorithm on the platform you choose to engage with.
Exactly. And it's also, they're your customers now. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, they're not your customers. They're that platform's customers. Email, those are your customers now. Even if, say, your email software decides that you are no good, you still have the customer list. You have the CSV file. You can go to another platform.
So I actually had a conversation with someone the other day, a client, and they're like, emailing daily is far too overwhelming. Like, what's the frequency I should be doing? So do you have any advice on like how to change that lens, and potentially even advice on how you go about writing your daily emails?
The way I've always looked at it is, if you are truly in love with your niche and your audience, obviously you've got a million thoughts percolating through your mind. Just put one of them down. Not every single email has to be this profound revelation. Sometimes people just want reassurance that everything's going to be okay. And sometimes they just want to know about your life. I'll share like snippets from my life. Like, for example, I'll say like, I'm writing this at the airport, my plane's delayed. That doesn't exactly add much value, but it does show that I'm a human being. It does show that, behind this persona that is emailing them is a real person who has feelings, who sometimes gets annoyed, who sometimes makes mistakes. And people are going to like that about you, because sometimes people will buy a product purely because of one offhanded comment you made 3 months ago. Like me saying I like my eggs over easy, for example. Like, I like my eggs over easy too. This guy must be cool. And the way I've always looked at it is, don't try to make it perfect. Just make it good enough, because good enough compounds really, really well. Good enough 7 times a week is much better than pretty good, like twice a month.
It's funny, like my mentor and I talk about reps, and everyone who's listening to this podcast has heard me say reps about 1 million times on this podcast. But it's like, what are the actions that you can take every single day that can lead to an outcome that you want to achieve? And so like for me, an engaged email subscriber list is a very good outcome to have, because I'll tell you what, there's not many people in the world, especially not authors, who have an engaged email list. I would dare say that 1% of authors have an engaged email list. Most of them don't even have an email list because they just stick to selling on marketplaces where they can't get customer data. So
exactly,
those kind of reps every single day, like Oliver's mentioned here, are fundamental, because that that's going to help you engage with your customer. It's, if ever the opportunity comes up where you need to survey them and get feedback from them around your book, around potential other books that you're thinking about writing, like you're going to have a group of people who are there, who know you, who like you, who trust you, and they're going to be willing to respond to you, give feedback, do a lot more than someone who someone who's built an email list and has emailed them maybe twice a month, if that, and they just forgot potentially. Because like most people build a list, they're like consistent for a little while, and then they just forget, or like it becomes too much and it's not valuable enough for them, and they don't do the reps essentially. So
no, you're completely right. And I love what you said about the future book ideas. I think right now we have 10 books live right now. I have another 14 that are 100% going to be made. just based off email feedback from people.
Wow.
And thinking, okay, this area people are really struggling with. This particular sector, people don't know how to analyze the stocks in. Okay, we'll make a book about that. We'll make a book about that. Because all of this feedback, you start noticing the patterns, you start noticing the problems that come up. The same 5 or 6 questions are the most frequent. For example, with what I do, I saw everyone asking me about crypto. We didn't have any crypto books. I didn't plan on doing any crypto books, but my thought was, well, they may as well learn it from me because I'm going to guide them better than someone else will. And I'm going to help them with the truth as opposed to, a lot of bad actors in that particular space. So that's the level of engagement and feedback. And we released that book. It became a bestseller in, I don't know, about 4 days. That was actually our most successful book for about 6 or 7 months straight. And that's not even the core of what we do. It's purely because that was what the market wanted at the time. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have that level of feedback.
And you can write the best book in the world, but if it's against the market trend, you're gonna fail at the end of the day.
100%, because trends change, sentiment changes, things fall out of favor. And you're right, you can't swim against the tide here. You have to go with the tide.
Mm-hmm. So you've got your email address in your book. How has that helped facilitate relationships with readers?
It's been so beautiful beyond like anything I could imagine. I have readers that are now my friends. I have readers who now work with us at Freeman Publications. I had an email from someone who said, hey, we named our son, and forgive me, I can't remember what they named their son, but the middle name was Oliver. And he said, we kind of both like him and his wife. We kind of both like the name Oliver more, so we call him Ollie now. And whether you had a hand in that or not, maybe it was subconscious, but I just want to say thank you. And to get an email like that, I'm like, wow, this is just me, sitting behind a computer all day. And to have these relationships now and to be able to, meet people in real life, and that it opens up so many doors and opportunities for me and for the business. It's the completely unexpected side of, being an author, writing books, and sort of having a business around that.
I think it's so interesting because we're in this digital veil almost. And books are supposed to be a way of like creating something physical in that space, but yet we're still so well optimized in that realm that we can still handle everything on a digital aspect. Like there's literally zero need for you to do any fulfillment, any printing, anything like that. And so there's like this digital veil disconnect of the physical actually being in the hands of the customers. And so like being able to go beyond that and actually engaging with people and having that like community aspect around the content, the books you create and the emails that you write, I think it's so impactful and like such a good reminder that you're making change in the world, because it's pretty easy to like sit here at your computer and go like, I'm not really, like I'm just doing my business. I'm not really like impacting someone's world or, but seeing that stuff come through is it's just a fantastic reminder that the reps that you're doing are actually making a positive impact in people's lives.
Exactly. Like I remember when we first connected and we were speaking a bit, and I said, look, I'm not solving world hunger, but I do feel like I'm making an impact with people. And I don't think a lot of people can sit there and honestly say that with what they do for a living. And I feel so blessed because it's like, well, I get paid to do this. And sometimes I get questions from people saying like, hey, this book stuff, do you actually make money? I was like, yeah, you'd be surprised. And it's like, I get to get paid doing what I love. I get to actually impact people. I get to get that feedback. It's amazing. I just feel so blessed to be able to do that. Like when a lot of people can't say they can do that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Ollie, it's been awesome connecting and having you on the show. Is there anywhere that you would like to send people to wrap up the episode?
freemanpublications.com. That's the best place to find out about us. That's what we do. You can see what we're all about. You can even get some free stock picks.
Awesome. Appreciate that, man. And I'll make sure that that's in the show notes as well, so that's easy for someone to go there. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Chris.
What an awesome episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so you get notified every single time a new episode releases. And if you're struggling with your book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit of your book sales to see where we can help you bridge the gap between not many sales to a lot of sales. It's a free resource call that we have together where I give you some clear action steps that you can take to take your stuff from broken to selling. I'll see you over there. Thanks again for listening.